Vexia squinted at the rusted hunk of metal masquerading as a door. "Infernal piece of junk," she muttered, kicking it with a boot that had seen better days. Her fellow gladiators watched with varying levels of enthusiasm, like spectators betting on a fight between a can opener and a stubborn tin can. "Bet you a week's rations it doesn't open," grumbled Ronk, a hulking brute with a face like a bulldog that had lost a fight with a lawnmower. "I'm not taking that bet," she replied, giving it another kick for good measure. The Crucible's prep room was a picture of grim optimism, like a clown funeral. Flimsy benches lined the steel walls, and a stale smell of sweat and regret hung in the air. The place was a haven for cynics, gamblers, and those too lazy to find a proper way to die. Watch and learn, amateurs. Vexia pulled out a spanner from her belt, jammed it into a gap in the door, and twisted. Not for the first time, she thanked the universe for making her stubborn and mechanically inclined. The door screeched open, yielding to brute force and sheer bloody-mindedness, much like Ronk. "And they say violence isn't the answer," she said, slipping through the opening. Inside, chaos reigned supreme. The arena was a cacophony of noise and light, designed to distract you just enough so you didn't notice the guy sneaking up to stab you in the back. The Dark Council, a bunch of alien sadists with a penchant for opera gloves and torture, loomed high above, observing the contestants like a kid with a magnifying glass over an ant hill. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vexia announced, arms wide like a ringmaster at a particularly twisted circus, "welcome to the finest show this side of the Milky Way. Hope you all brought your A-game. And body armor." Definitely body armor. Her team was a motley crew, the kind you'd find at a flea market at the edge of the universe. Ronk, whose brawn was only surpassed by his collection of vulgar tattoos. Cree, a wiry woman with nerves of steel and a laugh like shards of glass. And Trent, a skinny techie who still held onto his glasses from Earth as if they would somehow help him see the logic in this mad place. "Remember, it's all about survival," Vexia said, shooting a look at Cree, who was busy sharpening a blade with a zeal usually reserved for religious fanatics and knife enthusiasts. "And if we can make it out alive, I'll buy the first round. If we live through this, I'll buy everyone a bloody spaceship," Trent piped up, peering nervously at the giant screen displaying odds, names, and projected time of death. "You couldn't afford a paper plane, let alone a spaceship," Cree shot back, grinning sharply. Vexia felt the familiar churn of adrenaline in her gut. The Crucible was more than a death trap. It was a stage where humanity's worst impulses were indulged by the Dark Council, who loved nothing more than a good human tragedy. Vexia guessed it had something to do with our knack for making a mess of things in spectacular fashion. As she led them down the grimy hall, the distant cheers of the crowd growing louder, she thought about the absurdity of it all. This wasn't a fight for freedom or honor. It was a twisted game played on a galactic scale. But if you played your cards right, you could live to play another day. "All right, gang," Vexia said, stopping at the entrance to the arena floor. "Remember, stick together, aim for the soft parts, and if you see something that looks like it should be extinct, it probably is. And here I was thinking about making friends," Ronk muttered, flexing his fists. They stepped into the arena and were greeted by a scene straight out of someone's fever dream, probably a sadist with a degree in chaos engineering. Alien flora and fauna intermingled with human detritus, a testament, if you were into that sort of thing, to how thoroughly the Dark Council had mashed different worlds together like a cosmic smoothie. "Well, this looks cozy," Trent said, eyeing a plant that seemed overly interested in his shoelaces. The announcer's voice boomed over the speakers, a cheerful tone at odds with the bloodshed about to unfold. "Welcome, beloved contestants and valued spectators, to another thrilling episode of The Crucible. Who will rise? Who will fall? Who will make a mess we'll have to clean up later?" Vexia shook her head. "I'd hate to see what these guys call a family reunion. Probably involves a lot more screaming," Cree suggested, adjusting her grip on her knife. As the countdown began, Vexia felt the familiar rush of chaos taking over. This was it. The moment where skill, luck, and a healthy dose of insanity collided. The Dark Council watched from their ivory towers of cruelty, but down here, it was just another day in paradise. The buzzer went off, and everything exploded into noise and motion. Vexia darted forward, already calculating the angles and entry points in her head. Ronk was beside her, a human wrecking ball with a death wish. Cree and Trent flanked her, forming a ragtag formation that had somehow gotten them through the past chaos. Amidst the pandemonium, Vexia spotted another team advancing, their leader brandishing a weapon that looked like it had been designed by a committee of psychopaths. "Incoming," she yelled, ducking as a projectile whizzed past her ear. "I swear if I die today, I'm haunting you," Trent grumbled, firing off a shot from a weapon that had seen better centuries. "Good luck finding me in the afterlife," Vexia replied, grinning despite herself. "I plan on being very elusive." The arena was a blur of violence and survival. Vexia moved with the practiced grace of someone who had learned to thrive in chaos, each step a dance around death. Ronk's laughter boomed like a war drum, and she used it as a beacon to navigate the battlefield. "You know," Cree shouted over the din, "there are easier ways to get a workout." "Yeah," Vexia grunted, vaulting over an obstacle that might have once been a vending machine. "But where's the fun in that?" The alien creatures unleashed by the Dark Council were the stuff of nightmares, all teeth and tentacles and bad attitudes. It was like someone had taken the time to compile a greatest hits of evolutionary mistakes and unleashed them for everyone's viewing pleasure. Trent was busy hacking into a terminal, face screwed up in concentration. "I can get us a map," he called, fingers flying over the controls. "Good," Vexia replied, swatting away a creature that had mistaken her for lunch. "And see if you can order us a pizza while you're at it." The map flickered to life on their visors, a chaotic jumble of lines and symbols. Vexia scanned it quickly, her mind racing to form a plan. "All right, we head northwest, cut through the ruins, and make for the extraction point." "Sounds like a walk in the park," Ronk said, cracking his knuckles. "If the park was on fire. And full of bears." They moved as one, a unit forged in the fires of desperation and adrenaline. Cree was a whirlwind of blades, her laughter cutting through the chaos like a siren. Trent held his own, a testament to the fact that even the unlikeliest of souls could survive in this madhouse. But it was Vexia who led them, her mind a constant churn of strategies and contingencies. The Crucible was a game, a sick joke played on humanity, but she refused to be the punchline. As they reached the edge of the arena, panting and blooded, Vexia felt the familiar tug of exhaustion. But there was a thrill too, a sense of having defied the odds once more. "Well," she said, looking at her ragtag team, "that was fun. Let's never do it again." Cree laughed a laugh that was more bark than anything. "You say that every time." "Maybe one day I'll mean it," Vexia replied, smirking. But as the announcement rang over the speakers, declaring the next round would begin shortly, she knew the cycle would continue. The Dark Council watched and they played their game. But until the day she escaped this hellhole, Vexia would fight, survive, and keep her team in one piece. After all, someone had to buy the first round. The arena floor wasn't a place for the faint-hearted, or anyone with a basic sense of self-preservation, really. Vexia and her team had barely caught their breath from the previous round when the familiar, disconcerting rumble of the gates opening signaled another delightful chapter of impending doom. "Round 2, fight," Ronk declared with mock enthusiasm, cracking his knuckles with a sound like small bones breaking. "Do they not even give us a chance to freshen up?" Trent complained, adjusting his glasses in a futile attempt to look less like a rabbit caught in headlights and more like a slightly braver rabbit caught in headlights. Vexia surveyed the arena, where alien flora swayed ominously, as if whispering sweet nothings about their inevitable deaths. Her eyes narrowed at the sight of a new team entering from the opposite side, led by none other than Kor, a cunning bastard who would sell his own grandmother for a slightly better weapon. Rumor had it he once did, but the details were hazy. Kor's team was a sight, like a biker gang that had crash-landed on a planet of mutants and decided to make the best of it. They were armed to the teeth, which was a saying Vexia suddenly felt might have been coined by someone who met Kor's crew. "Vexia," Kor shouted across the arena, voice carrying like a bad stench. "Looking forward to rearranging your face, love." "Kor," Vexia shot back, her smile razor-sharp. "I'd say the same, but I doubt anyone could tell the difference." Kree snorted, her laughter punctuated by the metallic shink of her blade. "What is it with men and their need to act like peacocks before a fight?" "Must be compensating for something," Vexia replied, eyes still locked on Kor. "Maybe the size of their brain cells." As the teams approached the center of the arena, Vexia noticed the weapons Kor's team wielded. They were alien all right, but there was something particularly unsettling about them, as though someone had taken the concept of a Swiss Army knife and added a touch of Lovecraftian horror. "Weapons check," Vexia suggested, peering at a gun her size with suspicious protrusions. Trent, their techie savant, frowned at the devices. "These look like they are designed to do, well, anything. Or nothing. Or both at the same time." "Alien tech," Kree mused. "Either you love it or it kills you. Sometimes both. Usually both." The battle commenced, chaos erupting like a kindergarten play gone horribly wrong. Vexia dodged a projectile from one of Kor's cronies, the thing zipping by her ear with a sound that suggested it was fueled by spite and caffeine. "Watch out," Ronk bellowed, launching himself at an opponent with the elegance of a falling fridge. The alien weapons began to showcase their unpredictable nature. One moment, a member of Kor's team fired a shot that exploded into a net of crackling energy, ensnaring Trent, who yelped like a startled cat. "Get this off." He flailed in a manner that was both comical and concerning, the net sparking around him. "I'm not a fish. Hold still," Kree instructed, slicing through the net with surgical precision. "Unless you want a permanent perm." The weapons continued their erratic performances, firing beams that sometimes phased through targets, other times caused explosions, and occasionally turned into a shower of confetti, much to the confusion of all involved. "Maybe the aliens just have a great sense of humor," Vexia suggested, narrowly avoiding a blast that turned a nearby tree into something resembling modern art. "If their comedy involves vaporizing people, they should consider a new career," Ronk grunted, sending a foe flying with a well-placed fist. "Preferably far away from us." Kor appeared in their path, his eyes glinting with malice and what Vexia could only describe as an unhealthy enthusiasm for carnage. "Vexia, dear," he called, voice dripping with the kind of charm that made you want to check your wallet and your pulse. "Join me and together we'll rule this pit." "I'd rather eat Ronk's cooking," Vexia retorted, spinning to avoid a wild swing of Kor's bizarre weapon, a staff-like device that seemed to alternate between pulsing with energy and making a noise like a disgruntled cat. "Hey," Ronk protested, clobbering another opponent. "My cooking is great. Great if you like your food with a side of gastrointestinal distress," Kree muttered, ducking another blast. The battle raged on, each team trying to outmaneuver the other while simultaneously avoiding the environmental hazards the arena enjoyed throwing their way. Alien beasts, summoned from whatever nightmare zoo the Dark Council had raided, joined the fray with enthusiasm that suggested they were not just in it for the snacks. Vexia and Kor's paths collided once more, a whirlwind of paras and jabs, their weapons clashing with a sound like the universe's worst orchestra. "Give up, Vexia," Kor taunted, dodging her strikes with infuriating ease. "You know this is the end of the line." "I've heard that before," Vexia grinned, aiming a kick that sent him staggering back. "Yet here I am, still being a thorn in your side." Kor regained his balance, a gleam of grudging respect in his eyes. "You've got spirit. Shame it's all gonna go to waste." "Not today," she replied, adrenaline coursing through her veins, the thrill of battle overshadowing the ever-present specter of death. The alien weapons continued to surprise. Kor's staff, in a moment of spectacular timing, emitted a blast that ricocheted off a nearby rock, missing everyone entirely, and instead causing a creature with too many legs to explode in a shower of ichor. "Well, that's one way to solve a pest problem," Cree noted dryly, wiping gore off her knife. "These weapons are a bloody liability," Trent muttered, fiddling with his, trying to coax some reliably lethal behavior out of it. "Just think of them as playing hard to get," Vexia suggested, deflecting another errant beam with a less-than-graceful twist. The tide began to turn, Vexia's team gaining ground not through superior firepower, but through sheer bloody determination and a remarkable ability to improvise. Core's crew, though well-armed and confident, lacked the scrappy survival instinct that had gotten Vexia's team this far. In the midst of the chaos, Ronk managed to wrestle a weapon from one of Core's men, holding it aloft triumphantly. "Let's see what this does," he declared, firing off a shot that fizzled out harmlessly. "Guess it's out of juice," Cree commented, not unkindly. "Story of my life," Ronk grumbled, tossing the weapon aside. Their momentum carried them forward, pressing Core's team back, the tide of battle shifting in their favor. Vexia could see the frustration etched on Core's face as his well-laid plans unraveled, a sight she couldn't help but relish. As the fight dragged on, Vexia caught sight of Ronk, Cree, and Trent, each of them pushing their limits but not breaking. They were fighters, survivors, the kind of people who could find humor in the darkest situations, and for Vexia, there was no better company to face hell with. Finally, amidst the debris and chaos, the shrill sound of the arena's sirens announced the end of the bout, a temporary reprieve from the madness. Core's team, battered and bruised, retreated with what little dignity they could muster, a promise of future conflict hanging in the air like the aftertaste of bad coffee. "Good riddance," Ronk puffed, hands on his knees, catching his breath. "I don't know about you, but I'm getting too old for this." "You're 30, Trent pointed out, adjusting his glasses. "Hardly ancient. Feels older," Ronk retorted, straightening up with a wince. Vexia, brushing dust and alien goo off her armor, looked at her team, her family, really, and couldn't help but smile, a rare thing in the grim hellhole of the Crucible. They'd survived another round, and though the battles would keep coming, so would they. "Drinks on you, Vexia," Cree reminded, sheathing her blade with a flourish that suggested she might have missed her calling as a circus performer. Yeah, Vexia conceded, leading the way back to the prep room. "And next time, let's aim to survive with a little more style and a little less getting blown up." "Where's the fun in that?" Ronk chuckled, clapping her on the back with enough force to make her stagger. "I'll take surviving any day," Trent added, a nervous edge to his voice that suggested he might not need caffeine for a while. As they trudged back, a motley band of misfits in a galaxy gone mad, Vexia couldn't help but feel a surge of defiance. The Dark Council watched their bloody games, but for now, Vexia and her team were still standing, still fighting, and she intended to keep it that way. Even if it meant buying a couple more rounds. The prep room was a symphony of disgruntled groans and the unmistakable stench of sweat, like a gym that had given up on hygiene. Vexia leaned against the flimsy bench, inspecting the alien weapon she'd liberated from one of Core's lackeys. It was a peculiar contraption, part weapon, part puzzle, and entirely a headache. "Looks like you're trying to teach a dog to play chess," Cree commented, watching Vexia fiddle with the device. "But less likely to piss on your shoes." "I'd take the dog," Vexia muttered, turning the gadget over. "At least it might fetch." Trent, still buzzing from the adrenaline of not dying, peered over her shoulder. "You sure that thing won't blow up in your face?" "Considering our track record, that seems more likely than not," Ronk quipped, nursing a bruise that was the size of a small moon. Ignoring Ronk's cheerful pessimism, Vexia pressed a button. The weapon hummed ominously, lights flickering in a sequence that suggested it might be signaling an alien mothership or possibly powering up a blender. "There's something going on inside this thing," she mused, half to herself. "Yeah, it's called imminent explosion," Cree said, stepping back with a look that said she'd rather not become a meat smoothie. Instead of an explosion, the weapon emitted a low tone like a whale trying its hand at opera. The lights settled into a steady glow, and Vexia couldn't help but smirk. "I think I've got it." Famous last words, Ronk sighed, rubbing his temples. "If it starts singing Daisy Bell, run." "Seriously, what does it do?" Trent asked, his techie brain already salivating at the prospect of alien engineering. "Does it shoot, fly, make coffee?" Vexia shrugged. Only one way to find out. Before any of them could protest, she aimed the weapon at a rusted locker and pressed what she hoped was the right button. Instead of firing a beam of death or exploding into confetti, the locker simply vanished with a gentle pop, leaving behind a perfectly round hole in reality. "Well, that's new," Cree said, her voice a mixture of awe and exasperation. "It's a bloody teleportation gun, and here I was hoping for a smoothie maker," Ronk lamented, shaking his head. Trent's eyes gleamed with geeky excitement. "This could change everything. We could beam straight into Core's prep room and give them a surprise they'll never forget." "Or beam ourselves into a wall," Vexia countered, the practical side of her brain already compiling a list of things that could go wrong. "Besides, I doubt it'll be that easy." As if on cue, the door to the prep room slammed open, revealing a figure none of them had expected, Leela, one of the Dark Council's many errand runners, her expression sharp as a knife. "Ah, the Council's favorite messenger," Cree said with a mock salute. "Here to deliver more misery, I take it." "Save the theatrics, Cree," Leela replied, unimpressed. "I've got news. The Dark Council is changing the rules." "Great," Ronk groaned. "Just when I thought this day couldn't get any worse." Leela raised an eyebrow. "Henceforth, the arena will have randomized hazards, new beasts, environmental traps, real fun stuff. Your little teleportation gadget won't be the only surprise." Vexia exchanged a glance with her team. "Let me guess, this is their idea of leveling the playing field. More like shaking it up," Leela corrected. "The Council's curious to see how you humans adapt." "Adapt," Ronk echoed, voice thick with sarcasm. "Is that what they're calling it?" Leela turned on her heel, ready to depart. "Just thought you'd like to know. Enjoy your last meal." "Comforting as ever," Vexia called after her. "Don't forget to send a postcard." With Leela gone, the room was silent except for the persistent hum of the alien device that could now whisk them into unknown parts of the universe, or into a pit of spikes, depending on their luck. "So, how screwed are we?" Trent asked, pushing his glasses up his nose, a gesture of both curiosity and mounting anxiety. Vexia let out a breath. "On a scale from 1 to we're all going to die, probably about a solid 9. At least we'll die interestingly," Cree offered, sheathing her knife with a resigned flourish. "Yeah, because that's what I've always wanted," Ronk muttered, sarcasm thick enough to spoon up. "A memorable death." Vexia stood, her decision made. "All right, let's put this teleportation thing to the test. If it works, we might just have an edge." "And if it doesn't?" Trent asked, already knowing the answer. "Then at least we won't be bored," she replied, grinning like someone who'd just challenged death to a game of chess. The next round was set to begin, and the team found themselves on the threshold of the arena, the oppressive weight of expectation hanging over them like a particularly aggressive cloud. Vexia clutched the teleportation gun, its potential both tantalizing and terrifying. "Remember," she instructed, her tone serious, "we treat this thing like a last resort. No jumping into the unknown unless we have no other choice." "Spoken like someone who's read the manual," Ronk snorted, stretching his arms with a wince. The gates opened, revealing the arena in its freshly randomized glory. The landscape had changed, new obstacles and creatures added like the world's deadliest obstacle course. Jagged rocks jutted from the ground, while strange, glowing flora pulsed ominously. "Looks like someone's been playing God with a Lego set," Cree observed, eyeing the terrain with distrust. The horn blared, signaling the start of the round. Vexia's team surged forward, their movements cautious but determined, each step a reminder that their survival depended on wits and luck, and maybe a touch of madness. Things went south almost immediately. Core's crew had also adapted. their nasty assortment of weapons now supplemented with devices that seemed to alter the very ground beneath their feet. Ronk narrowly avoided a pit trap that yawned open like a hungry maw. "Watch your step, genius," Cree called, her voice tinged with humor as she yanked him back. "Yeah, I was planning to jump in for a swim," Ronk retorted, dusting off his shoulders. "But thanks." Trent, meanwhile, was doing his best to not get skewered by a projectile that looked suspiciously like a giant mosquito. "Why do they always have to be bugs?" he complained, batting it away with his spanner. "Guess the universe hates you," Vexia replied, fending off one of Kor's more enthusiastic henchmen with a flurry of blows. As the chaos unfolded, Vexia realized that the alien teleportation gun might be their best shot at turning the tide. She aimed it at the heart of Kor's formation, fingers crossed for a miracle rather than a mess. "Ready?" she shouted over the din and without waiting for an answer fired. This time it worked. Kor and his closest allies vanished in an instant, reappearing on the other side of the arena, bewildered and disoriented. The unexpected maneuver gave Vexia's team a precious opening. "They look like chickens in a henhouse," Ronk laughed, knocking another opponent out cold. "We might just pull this off," Trent said, a note of hope creeping into his voice. But the Dark Council wasn't about to let them coast to victory. The arena's hazards intensified, as if someone had cranked the screw-you dial to 11. Out of nowhere, a swarm of creatures descended, flying, screeching, and all too eager to turn the arena into a buffet. "On second thought, maybe not," Trent amended, eyes wide as he ducked under a swooping beast. Vexia gritted her teeth, fighting the urge to unleash a string of curses. "Keep moving. Don't let them pin us down." The arena was a whirl of chaos, each team struggling to adapt to the new threats. Yet Vexia's mind was already working overtime, considering their options. The teleportation gun had bought them time, but it wouldn't be enough. They needed something more, a way to outthink not just Kor but the sadistic minds of the Dark Council. Then it hit her. The teleportation gun wasn't just a weapon, it was a tool that could shift the battlefield itself. A plan, half-formed but desperate, began to take shape in her mind. "Cree," she called, dodging a swipe from a creature that looked like a cross between a bear and a blender. "Think you can handle a little chaos?" Cree's grin was all teeth and daring. "Chaos is my middle name." "Let's change the rules," Vexia said, aiming the teleportation gun not at Kor, but at the arena itself. She fired, the weapon's power surging as it began to warp reality, reshaping the battlefield with each pulse. The effect was immediate and disorienting. The ground shifted, trees vanished and reappeared, the creatures thrown into confusion as their very environment betrayed them. Kor's team struggled to keep their footing, the sudden shift leaving them vulnerable. "Now or never," Ronk yelled, rallying their team with a fervor that bordered on reckless. Vexia nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. They had a chance, a slim, perilous chance to turn the tide. And as the arena continued its chaotic dance, they charged forward, ready to seize whatever opportunities fate or the Dark Council threw their way. For better or worse, they were in this together, a ragtag group of misfits defying the odds in a galaxy that seemed hell-bent on breaking them. And for the first time, as they plunged into the fray, Vexia felt a flicker of hope in the madness, a belief that maybe, just maybe, they could survive this after all. The arena was a nightmare on steroids. You could almost hear the Dark Council cackling in the background, like some cosmic game show dialed up to 11 just to see the contestants squirm. And squirm, they did, with gusto. Kor's crew had regrouped faster than a pack of rats after a cheese explosion, and they were sporting new toys that made Vexia's teleportation gun look like a quaint antique. Their leader stood in the center, a cocky grin plastered on his face. His new weapon of choice, a gravity gun, if the way Ronk suddenly found himself hovering a meter off the ground was anything to go by. "Well, that's one way to lose weight," Ronk quipped, flailing like a fish out of water. "Focus, Ronk," Vexia barked, the edge in her voice sharp enough to cut through his levitating antics. We've got bigger problems. Always with the bigger problems, Ronk shot back, finally managing to claw his way back to solid ground. I miss when my biggest issue was breakfast. Kor's laughter rang out across the chaos, echoing with all the charm of a rusty nail scraping against a blackboard. What's wrong, Vexia? Not enjoying the view from down there. If I wanted your opinion, Kor, I'd listen to a garbage compactor, Vexia retorted, her eyes scanning the arena for any potential advantages in this death trap of an environment. The Dark Council's latest additions were a real treat. Droning machines whirred overhead, their overlapping hums crafting a symphony of impending doom. Meanwhile, the ground was a patchwork of traps designed by someone with a twisted sense of humor. Vines reached up like they wanted a hug, but their thorny embrace promised more than just a prick. Think you could knock some sense into the council next time they have arena renovations? Trent suggested, dodging another swarm of bugs with impressive agility. Sure, I'll put it on my to-do list, Vexia replied dryly, firing the teleportation gun at a cluster of Kor's goons. They reappeared over a pit of snapping plants, their screams adding to the cacophony. Kree was a blur of movement, her knife a silver dart dancing through the chaos. She took out two of Kor's lackeys with a fluid grace that spoke of experience and perhaps a little too much enthusiasm. Anyone else thinking we're the meat in the universe's grinder? She asked, breathless but exhilarated. At least we're premium cuts, Vexia called back, wrenching her attention from Kor for a split second, enough time for him to point his gravity gun at the ground beneath her feet. Vexia barely managed to dive out of the way as the earth beneath her exploded upwards, showering her in dirt and debris. You really know how to make a girl feel special, Kor, she gasped, struggling to her feet. Special's one way to put it, Kor replied, faux innocence dripping from his words like venom. I'd call it foreplay. Charming, Vexia shot back, flicking dirt off her shoulder and trying to ignore the way her heart was racing. But I prefer my partners a little less homicidal. The next round of chaos was triggered not by Kor or his shiny new toy, but by the arena itself. As if tiring of the two teams' antics, it decided to shake things up, literally, by rumbling ominously and shifting the landscape underfoot like a sadistic kaleidoscope of doom. Great, it's alive, Ronk muttered, steadying himself against a conveniently placed rock that promptly tried to swallow his hand. You could say it's got a mind of its own, Trent observed, narrowly avoiding being trampled by a stampede of half-crazed creatures that had no business existing outside a nightmare. Mind, maybe. Sense not so much, Vexia concluded, her own balance a precarious affair as the terrain continued to betray them at every turn. Amidst the turmoil, Vexia spotted a glimmer of something that wasn't trying to kill them. A device half buried under rubble, blinking with a soft, inviting light. Hold the fort, she instructed, sprinting toward the mysterious object. If you get yourself killed, I'll never forgive you, Ronk yelled after her, his voice a mix of annoyance and concern. I'll pencil that into my schedule too, Vexia replied, skidding to a halt beside the device. With a quick assessment that might have been reckless by anyone else's standards, she yanked it free of the debris. The device was an arena control panel, or what looked like a remnant of something more sophisticated. Its purpose was unclear, but the buttons were marked in a language she half recognized from her studies of alien tech. Hey Trent, Vexia shouted, waving the device above her head. Think you can make sense of this? Trent, as ever the reluctant hero, nodded and darted toward her, weaving through the chaos with a surprising amount of grace. It's like the universe wants us to play with fire, he observed as he reached her side. Better than getting burned by it, Vexia countered. Think you can use it to buy us some time, maybe even the odds. Trent's fingers danced across the panel with the enthusiasm of a child in a candy store. If this thing does what I think it does, we might just have a chance. The arena seemed to hesitate, as if it too was curious about what the humans were up to. Kor, on the other hand, was not. He barked orders to his crew, attempting to reassert their control amidst the pandemonium. His confidence was less charming now, tinged with desperation. "Whatever you're doing, do it fast," Cree called, her knife now a blur of motion as she fended off yet another of Kor's henchmen. "No pressure," Trent muttered, pressing a button that glowed a particularly ominous shade of red. The arena responded with a groan, sections of the terrain shifting and locking into place like pieces on a deranged chessboard. "Nice trick," Ronk commented, as Kor's gravity gun was rendered ineffective by a conveniently placed boulder. "You learned that in How to Not Die 101. Self-taught," Trent replied, his eyes fixed on the panel as he continued to manipulate the arena's functions. "Stay close." "I'm not sure how long I can keep this up." Kor's frustration was palpable, his carefully orchestrated chaos unraveling at the seams. But he was nothing if not adaptable. "You think a few party tricks are enough to stop me?" he shouted, his voice cutting through the maelstrom. "No, but they are a start," Vexia answered, her voice steady despite the madness surrounding them. "You're not the only one who can play dirty." The exchange was interrupted by a fresh wave of arena-induced chaos. Vines erupted from the ground, snaring Kor's men and dragging them into the earth, their screams swallowed by the rumbling soil. "Looks like the arena's got our backs," Cree noted, her expression a mix of admiration and horror. "Or it just hates Kor," Ronk added, not bothering to hide his amusement. "Can't blame it, really." As the battle continued, Vexia's team found themselves with a rare advantage. The arena, chaotic and unpredictable as it was, seemed to be favoring them with its capricious design changes. Kor's forces were scattered, their cohesion shattered by the shifting terrain and relentless onslaught of arena-induced hazards. "Let's push forward," Vexia urged, her resolve hardening. "We've got a window, let's not waste it." Her team rallied, the tide turning in their favor as they pressed the attack. Kor, ever the opportunist, was not about to go down without a fight. He rallied his remaining forces, the gravity gun belching one last defiant salvo that tore through the air. "Watch out," Trent yelled, diving to one side as the blast narrowly missed him, instead striking the arena's control panel. The device sparked and sizzled, its lights flickering ominously before going dark. The arena seemed to pause, as if considering its next move, the chaos momentarily frozen in place. "Well, that can't be good," Ronk said, his words underscored by the low rumble of discontent that echoed through the arena. "No time to worry about it," Vexia replied, shaking off the debris and pulling her team together. "We've got to finish this, and fast." The battle resumed with renewed intensity, both sides aware that the stakes had never been higher. Vexia's team fought with a tenacity born of desperation, each of them aware that survival was not just about victory, but about defying the odds that were stacked so heavily against them. "Looks like your tricks are all used up," Kor taunted, his voice laced with the bitter edge of a man who knows he's losing. "What's next, Vexia? Gonna throw rocks?" Vexia met his gaze, her expression one of steely determination. "No," she replied, her voice carrying across the battlefield. "We're going to win." With that she charged forward, her team at her side. In that moment, in the heart of the chaos, they found something more than just survival. They found purpose. They found unity. They found the will to fight not just for themselves but for each other. Kor's forces, weakened and disoriented, could do little to stop them. The arena, ever the fickle ally, seemed to cheer them on with its shifting, treacherous landscape, its traps favoring the underdogs in this tale of cosmic defiance. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the battle ended. Kor's forces were broken, their leader retreating with a snarl, his bravado shattered along with his plans. Vexia's team stood victorious, battered but unbowed, their success hard-won and well-earned. In the silence that followed, the arena seemed to sigh, a sound that might have been relief or anticipation of the next test. "Well, that was something," Trent said, his voice thick with exhaustion and disbelief. Ronk collapsed onto a rock that didn't try to eat him for once. "I'd say it was worth it, but that'd be a lie." Cree sheathed her knife, her eyes meeting Vexia's with a look of shared triumph. "We did it," she said, the words simple but filled with meaning. Vexia nodded, her heart still racing but her spirit unbroken. "Yeah," she agreed, her voice quiet but fierce. "We did." Vexia stood amidst the aftermath, rubble and exhaustion her only companions. Victory always tasted better when it was served cold and hard-fought, but today it was bittersweet at best. The arena, that sentient playground of lunacy, had shifted again, this time to something more akin to a graveyard. The Dark Council was clearly growing bored with their little underdog story. It was only a matter of time before they'd spice things up, and never in a good way. Trent was nursing a nasty gash on his arm, a grimace playing on his lips between breaths. "Guess the universe doesn't dole out free wins. You expected a prize." "How quaint," Vexia replied, her voice dry as the arid landscape the arena had decided was the theme of the Ior. "They're just warming us up for the real show." Cree slumped down next to a chunk of what might have been a tree, back when trees were a thing. "I suppose next they'll drop a piano on us just to keep things interesting. Only if we're lucky," quipped Ronk, who was attempting to scrape something unidentifiably sticky off his boot. "Knowing our luck, it'll fall on Vexia's head first. They always go for the leader. I thought we were a democracy," Vexia shot back, though the jab lacked her usual edge. There was fatigue in her bones, the kind that no amount of bravado could shake off. "Democracy died the moment we signed up for this circus," Cree muttered, examining the edge of her blade, still sharp as her tongue. Ronk looked around, taking in their sorry state. "So, what's the plan, fearless leader?" "We can't just sit here waiting for the next death trap. Let me think," Vexia said, though her brain felt like it was trudging through molasses. The Dark Council loved to dangle hope just out of reach, only to yank it away when you got too close. But despair wasn't an option, not yet. The arena's oppressive silence was broken by a low hum, the familiar prelude to another round of madness. The ground beneath them vibrated with a sinister promise. Kor's retreat might have been a temporary reprieve, but it was clear the Council wasn't satisfied with the current level of chaos. They'd need a fresh supply of despair to keep their sadistic little show running. "Okay, new plan," Vexia said, rolling her shoulders and trying to ignore the ache in her muscles. "We take a moment to regroup, then we move." Sitting ducks are easy targets. "Any idea which way we should be moving?" Trent asked, wincing as he tightened the makeshift bandage on his arm. "Preferably away from Kor and his merry band of psychopaths," Vexia replied. "If we're lucky, they're just as lost as we are." "Yeah, because luck's been our best friend so far," Ronk grumbled, but there was a flicker of hope in his eyes, however faint. With nothing left to lose but their lives, which, in the grand scheme of the universe, wasn't much of a bargaining chip, the team set off into the shifting landscape. The terrain was unforgiving, as if sculpted by a toddler with a grudge and a sandbox full of nightmares. Each step was a calculated risk, every shadow a potential ambush. "Next time, remind me to opt for a career with less." "Mortal peril," Trent said, ducking under a jagged outcrop that looked suspiciously like teeth. "Like knitting. Or taxidermy." "Taxidermy has its own hazards," Cree pointed out, ever the realist. "I imagine some of the subjects don't take kindly to being stuffed." "True, but at least they are already dead," Trent countered. They navigated through what seemed like a forest of metallic thorns, each one gleaming with the promise of tetanus or worse. Ronk, ever the optimist, managed to snag his sleeve on every single one. "I swear these things are moving on purpose," he grumbled, yanking his arm free for the umpteenth time. "Maybe they're just drawn to you," Vexia suggested. "A mutual affinity for sharp objects. I'd prefer if they kept their affections to themselves," Ronk replied, finally disentangling himself from the malevolent shrubbery. As they pushed on, a distant noise drew their attention, a low, rhythmic thumping, like the heartbeat of some colossal beast. It was both ominous and strangely comforting, a reminder that they weren't alone in this god-forsaken place. "Any bets on what fresh hell that is?" Cree asked, though her tone suggested she wasn't expecting any good answers. Could be the council's idea of a lullaby Ronk offered, or Core's crew throwing a tantrum. Either way, we'll find out soon enough, Vexia said. Let's keep moving. With any luck, we'll stumble across something useful, like a one-way ticket off this rock, Trent suggested, or a giant can opener. I'll settle for either, Ronk added. The journey was a slog, every step an exercise in futility and stubborn determination. They moved like shadows through the landscape, silent but for the occasional muttered curse or sarcastic quip. The arena might have been their enemy, but they'd be damned if they let it break them. After what felt like hours of trudging through the nightmare terrain, they stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood a structure, an ancient, crumbling edifice that looked like it had seen better days, possibly before the dawn of time. Well, this seems promising, Trent said, though his sarcasm was met with only weary nods of agreement. Better than nothing, Vexia replied, leading the way toward the decaying building. Let's poke around and see if it hides any surprises. If it doesn't try to eat us first, Ronk amended, eyeing the structure with distrust. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of dust and disuse, cobwebs hanging like tattered banners from the ceiling. The place was a mausoleum of forgotten horrors, shadows dancing across the walls as if mocking their intrusion. Charming place, Cree noted, her voice echoing in the oppressive silence. Needs a bit of redecorating, though. First thing on the list, Vexia agreed, her eyes scanning the gloom for anything that might be of use. But let's focus on not dying first. They split up, each taking a section of the ruin to explore. The building was a warren of collapsing corridors and dead ends, the kind of place that promised secrets and delivered only disappointment. Found anything resembling a survival plan? Ronk called, his voice bouncing off the stone walls. Just a whole lot of nothing, came Cree's reply, her tone as dry as the dust they were kicking up. Vexia was about to respond when a glint caught her eye, a faint shimmer in the debris, half buried and forgotten. She crouched down, brushing away the detritus to reveal a small, cube-like device. Its surface was etched with symbols, alien and familiar all at once. What have you got there? Trent asked, appearing at her side. Not sure, Vexia admitted, turning the cube over in her hands, but it looks important, or at least like it could be. Let's hope it's not a self-destruct button, Ronk chimed in, peering over her shoulder. Only one way to find out, Vexia replied, pressing her thumb against one of the symbols. The cube hummed to life, lights flickering across its surface in a dance of unknown purpose. Well, it's not ticking, Cree observed, joining the huddle around the mysterious device. Yet Ronk added, ever the pessimist. Vexia watched the lights, entranced by their rhythmic pattern. They seemed to pulse in time with the thumping they'd heard earlier, as if the cube was in tune with the very heartbeat of the arena. Could be a weapon, Vexia mused. Or a communication device. Maybe even a map, or a fancy paperweight, Ronk suggested. Whatever it is, we've got to use it wisely, she said, pocketing the cube for safekeeping. It could be the edge we need. Assuming it doesn't blow us to kingdom come, Cree pointed out. Assuming that, Vexia agreed, though a part of her was starting to hope. Just a sliver, but enough to keep moving forward. They regrouped and left the ruin, no more certain of their path but cautiously optimistic that they had a tool for the battle ahead. The arena was an ever-changing beast, but perhaps, for once, they had a chance to tame it. As they made their way back into the fray, the oppressive hum of the arena seemed to dim, as if acknowledging their resolve. Or maybe it was just ramping up for the next round of torment. It was hard to tell with these things. So what's next, Vexia? Plan to use that thing or just admire its alien aesthetics? Trent asked, falling into step beside her. First, we see if it can help us navigate this mess, Vexia replied. Then we survive, simple enough, Ronk said, his voice laced with irony. And here I thought we'd be doomed forever. Don't get too comfortable. The Dark Council's bound to throw more hurdles our way, Vexia warned. We'll need to be ready. Ready for what? Cree asked, her eyes scanning the horizon as if expecting the worst. Ready for anything, Vexia said, her jaw set with determination. even if that means digging deep and fighting dirty. The team moved with purpose, shadows stretching long in the dying light. They were battered, bruised, and on the brink of despair, but they were far from finished. In a universe that thrived on chaos, they were a defiant spark refusing to be snuffed out. As they pressed on, the thumping grew louder, more insistent, an ominous herald of challenges yet to come. Whether it was a promise or a threat, none of them could say. But they weren't about to back down. Not now, not when they'd come so far. In the heart of that relentless arena, with darkness closing in around them, they walked into the unknown with heads held high. Whatever lay ahead, they'd face it together, united by the odds stacked against them and the indomitable human spirit that refused to yield. Because sometimes, in the vast emptiness of space, that was all you had, and sometimes it was enough. The arena, in its endless wisdom, seemed to have ramped up the difficulty setting to sadist on a caffeine high. Vexia couldn't decide if the shifting landscape was more like a bad acid trip or an overly enthusiastic art installation. Either way, it was trying its best to kill them with creativity, and she wasn't having any of it. "All right, team," she said, hefting the alien cube like it was a magic 8-ball full of infinite possibilities. "Let's see what this little bastard can do. Here's hoping it doesn't make things worse," Ronk said, his voice laced with the kind of optimism usually reserved for funeral planners. "Oh, ye of little faith," Vexia replied, pressing another one of those enigmatic symbols. The cube responded with a series of clicks and whirs, the lights dancing like a miniature rave. Cree, ever the skeptic, leaned in. "Should we be standing back? You know, in case it decides to implode or open a portal to hell." "Probably," Trent answered, but nobody moved. What was the worst that could happen? Death. They were already on a first-name basis with that particular concept. The cube emitted a bright flash, and for a heart-stopping moment, Vexia thought she'd done it, finally triggered her own spectacular demise. But instead, the alien flora around them began to shift, the thorns retracting and the ground leveling out. It was a small miracle, the sort that might have inspired hope in less jaded souls. "Would you look at that?" Ronk breathed, a grin splitting his face. "Our very own gardening tool, yeah. Now if only it came with a user manual," Cree said, eyeing the cube like it might suddenly demand a blood sacrifice. Vexia felt a smirk tug at her lips. "Well, it's a start. Let's see if we can't turn this place into our own backyard." It was a ballsy move, one that relied heavily on the assumption that the cube wouldn't suddenly turn homicidal. But in the world of terrible odds and worse ideas, it was the best they had. As they pushed forward, the transformed terrain gave them a slight edge, one they'd need against Core and his merry band of psychopaths. And if they managed to piss off the Dark Council in the process, all the better. "Love what they've done with the place," Ronk quipped as they moved through the more hospitable landscape. "Never thought I'd see the day when alien tech had better taste than humans. It's not exactly feng shui," Trent added, "but it beats the murderous shrubbery." The rhythmic thumping that had haunted their every step was louder now, resonating through the ground like an angry god's temper tantrum. Vexia couldn't help but wonder if it was an indication of their success or a warning of the chaos to come. Whatever it was likely to be a pain in the ass. "Think it's the council's way of clapping?" Ronk asked, the grin never quite leaving his face. "I mean, they're probably not thrilled about us breaking their toys." "Good," Vexia replied, the cube clutched tightly in her hand. "I'd hate for them to have a boring show." Another click, another press of a cymbal, and the distant thumping faltered. Not much, just enough to make Vexia's heart skip a beat. It was like she'd reached into the very guts of the arena and given it a twist. "Now that's interesting," Cree said, her eyes narrowed in contemplation. "What else can that thing do?" "Hopefully something more impressive than landscaping," Trent replied, eyeing the cube with renewed interest. Vexia felt the weight of their expectations and the sting of her own doubts. But hell in for a penny. She pressed another cymbal and the arena jolted, the air crackling with energy. Above them the sky flickered, a digital mosaic that shifted with alarming speed. One moment they were beneath a blood-red sky, the next, it was a swirling tempest of blues and greens. "Well, that's not disorienting at all," Ronk said, swaying on his feet. "I didn't think vertigo was on the menu today. Gotta keep things interesting," Vexia replied, though she wasn't entirely sure if she was reassuring him or herself. With every button she pressed, the arena changed its tune. Terrain shifted, traps disarmed, and the once unyielding landscape became a canvas of possibilities. It was a strange feeling, like they'd been handed the reins to a particularly ornery beast. "Think we can use it to take out Core's crew?" Trent asked, the hopeful edge to his voice unmistakable. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Cree cautioned, though there was an unmistakable glint in her eye. "But it's worth a shot." "Nothing ventured, nothing gained," Vexia said, her fingers dancing across the cube's surface. The possibilities were endless, each more dangerous than the last. It was a gamble, but then again, so was everything else in this hellscape. The cube's latest trick was a doozy, the ground beneath them rumbling in response. A section of the arena floor heaved upward, forming a ridge that bisected the battlefield. It was a bold move, the kind that could divide and conquer if used wisely. "There," Vexia said, gesturing to the newly formed barrier. "Let's see how Core's crew likes that. They won't see it coming," Ronk agreed, his grin a fierce thing. "If we're lucky, they'll think twice about following us. Or they'll just get pissed and charge right in," Cree pointed out, though there was a certain satisfaction in her voice. "Either way, it's a distraction," Vexia replied, feeling a thrill of satisfaction. They'd taken their first steps towards outsmarting the arena, and for the first time, it felt like they were setting the pace. The Dark Council, no doubt, was watching with a mix of irritation and intrigue. Their carefully crafted chaos was being unraveled by a bunch of ragtag humans with nothing left to lose. It was a twist they hadn't planned for, and Vexia hoped it was driving them mad. "Let's keep moving," she said, the words like a mantra. "We've got the upper hand, and I intend to use it." With the cube in hand and a glimmer of hope in their hearts, they pushed onward. The arena might have been a living nightmare, but it was their nightmare now, and they were hell-bent on surviving it. As they maneuvered through the transformed landscape, the thumping continued, a relentless reminder of the stakes. Vexia couldn't shake the feeling that it was a countdown of sorts, ticking steadily towards an unknown climax. "Whatever's coming, we'll face it head-on," she said, her determination a steel blade cutting through the gloom. "If it's anything like what we've seen, we'll need more than luck," Trent replied, his voice laced with the cynicism of a man who'd seen too much. "Then we make our own," Ronk said, his grin unyielding. The cube in Vexia's hand was the key, a bridge between despair and survival. It was a leap of faith, the kind that could change the game if they played their cards right. The Dark Council had underestimated them, and now it was their turn to rewrite the rules. "You know, I'm starting to like our chances," Cree said, a wicked gleam in her eye. "Don't get too cocky," Vexia warned, though she couldn't help but share in the sentiment. For the first time in forever, it felt like they had a fighting chance. And in the pitiless void of space, that was more than anyone could ask for. Asterisk, 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 the arena continued to shift around them, like a kaleidoscope of nightmares determined to test their resolve. But with each passing moment, the team grew bolder, their steps more confident. Core's crew was out there somewhere, undoubtedly plotting their own moves. Vexia couldn't help but wonder if they even realized the tide was turning. It was a delicious thought, one she savored like a fine wine. As they moved through the twisted landscape, Vexia found herself contemplating their next move. The cube was a powerful tool, but it was only as good as the strategy guiding it. "What do you think, Cree?" she asked, seeking the pragmatist's insight. "About what?" Cree replied, her gaze never wavering from their surroundings. "About our chances, about this thing, all of it." Cree paused, her expression thoughtful. "We've got a chance, but only if we stay smart. One wrong move and it's all over." Comforting thought, Ronk quipped, though his smile belied the seriousness of the moment. "It's the truth," Cree said, unperturbed. "But that cube, it might just be the edge we need. Then let's use it wisely, Vexia replied, her resolve steel hard. We've got a lot more to do before we can think about winning. The arena might have been a living nightmare, but it was one they were starting to understand. Each twist and turn, each new challenge, was another piece of the puzzle. And with every step they pieced it together, one defiant act at a time. Let's keep moving, Vexia said, the cube warm in her hand. We've got a long way to go, but we're not backing down. With renewed determination, they pressed on, shadows against the dying light. The arena was vast and unforgiving, but for the first time, it felt like they were shaping its fate. In the face of impossible odds, they'd found their path, one paved with ingenuity, resilience, and a healthy dose of gallows humor. Because sometimes, even in the darkest corners of the universe, a little human creativity was all it took to turn the tide. The Crucible's prep room was as inviting as ever, a place with all the charm of a rusty nail party. Vexia took a moment to appreciate the ambience, the grimy benches, the oppressive stench of fear and sweat, and the ever-present aroma of impending doom. Truly a decorator's nightmare. Her team gathered around, each worn and battered but still clinging to that gritty determination only the terminally desperate possess. We're really doing this, huh? Ronk mused, a wry smile cutting through his exhaustion. Unless you've got a better idea than facing Core and his crew on that lovely death trap outside, Vexia replied, twirling the alien cube like it was a stress ball instead of a potential doomsday device. Cree snorted, arms crossed over her chest. Better idea. Here. Please, the only thing we're rich in is bad decisions. Trent shrugged, the picture of indifference. Could always try pleasing the Dark Council by turning on a reality show. They seem to enjoy watching us squirm. Or we could just keep doing what we're doing, staking our lives on Vexia's mystical cube of mayhem, Ronk added, giving the cube a cautious glance like it might bite him. Maybe it will, Vexia said, but at least it's giving us a fighting chance. The alien cube was their ace in the hole, a Pandora's box with buttons instead of a lid. So far, it had done more good than harm, but in the realm of alien technology, that was about as comforting as a malfunctioning airlock. Let's go ruin someone's day, she said, her voice dripping with challenge and just a hint of madness. Trent raised an eyebrow. Thought every day here was already ruined. Then let's make it extra special, Vexia retorted as they filed out of the prep room into the arena's shifting landscape. Outside, the arena was a symphony of chaos as always. The ground shifted with malicious intent, and the sky above flickered with digital storms, a cosmic screensaver gone wrong. Their footsteps were swallowed by the cacophony of the arena, each step a reminder of the impending confrontation with Core. The alien cube pulsed in her hand, as if sensing the coming storm. The rhythm matched the thumping in the distance, a war drum in the heart of the arena. Whether it belonged to Core's band of miscreants or was just another of the Dark Council's many delightful distractions, Vexia couldn't say. But it didn't matter. Today the plan was simple: disruption, chaos, and a little bit of humanity's finest ingenuity. Think they're ready for us? Cree asked, a smirk playing on her lips. If they are, I want to know where they bought their crystal ball, Ronk replied. Vexia chuckled, her resolve hardening. Let's give them a taste of what we're made of then. They moved with a purpose, Vexia at the helm, her mind racing with possibilities. The cube was their key, and with it, the arena was their playground. A homicidal one, sure, but they'd learned to play the game. Each step brought them closer to Core's territory, and with it, the promise of confrontation. The terrain heaved beneath them, a living thing unhappy at their presence. Vexia trusted her instincts and pressed another symbol on the cube. The ground responded, a ridge rising to shield their approach. Gotta love alien landscaping, Trent commented dryly as they advanced along the cover. Beats getting shot at, Vexia replied, though her grip on the cube was white-knuckled. As they neared Core's last known position, the air thickened with tension. The arena was a moody beast, and today it hummed with anticipation, a stage set for the main event. As they crept closer, the distant thumping grew louder, a reminder that they were not alone in this hellscape. "Think Kor's got any tricks left?" Ronk asked, low and cautious. "He's got tricks," Vexia said, her eyes scanning the terrain. "But we've got the ultimate party crasher." The ridge gave them a vantage point, one they used to scout Kor's crew. The opposition was gathered around a makeshift camp, their focus on the ominous thumping that seemed to hold them in thrall. Whatever Kor had planned, it was big, and Vexia had no intention of waiting around to find out. "Looks like a family reunion down there," Cree said, her voice dripping with disdain. "More like a family brawl, knowing Kor," Ronk added. "Time to crash it?" Trent asked, shifting his weight impatiently. "Like a meteor," Vexia said, her fingers dancing over the cube's surface. This was it, the moment to turn the tables. With a press of the cube, the landscape warped, rippling outwards like a stone thrown into a pond. The ridge became a wave, a rolling mass of earth that surged towards Kor's crew with the force of a freight train. "Ride that wave, baby," Ronk shouted, his excitement infectious. Kor's crew scattered like ants, their formation broken by the sudden upheaval. In the chaos, Vexia and her team descended, an avalanche of fury and calculated chaos. The fight was on before Kor or his crew could blink, each side a flurry of limbs, weapons, and primal survival instincts. Vexia led the charge, the cube's power complemented by her team's fierce determination. Kor, ever the opportunist, responded with his own brand of chaos, a deft flick of his gravity gun sending debris and bodies alike spiraling into the air. But Vexia wasn't in the mood for theatrics today. She sidestepped his opening gambit, spinning into the fray with the finesse of a dancer and the intent of a warrior. "Nice try, Kor," she called, her voice rising above the clamor. "But I've seen better moves at a toddler's dance recital," Kor sneered, his arrogance undiminished. "You're just full of surprises, Vexia, but I've got a few tricks left myself." She didn't doubt it, but this time they weren't just reacting. They were dictating the pace, and in this twisted game that made all the difference. Amidst the chaos, Ronk and Cree moved with lethal precision, their weapons an extension of their will to survive. They'd been through hell together, and it showed in their seamless coordination. "Trent, cover me," Ronk shouted, lunging into the fray with a madman's grin. Trent was already on it, his own weapon barking out a staccato rhythm as he provided cover fire. "On your left," Ronk, Cree meanwhile, slipped through the melee like a shadow. She tagged a member of Kor's crew with a swift punch that was more elbow than fist, followed by a well-placed knee to the ribs. The man went down like a marionette with its strings cut. "Next time, bring a better dance partner," she quipped, wiping the sweat from her brow. Kor was on the defensive now, his earlier bravado crumbling under the weight of Vexia's relentless assault. He rallied his remaining crew, barking orders with all the grace of a panicked captain steering a sinking ship. "Stay on them," Vexia commanded, her voice a whipcrack of authority. "Give up yet, Kor?" Ronk taunted, his grin wide enough to split his face. "Never," Kor spat, though his bravado was beginning to fracture. Vexia could see the frustration in his eyes, the realization that his carefully crafted plans were unraveling at the seams. It was a beautiful sight, one she relished even as she pressed her advantage. With one last flourish, she activated the cube again. The arena responded, the ground beneath Kor's feet quaking with purpose. He scrambled, but it was too late. The earth opened beneath him, swallowing him whole. "Now that's what I call a grand finale," Cree said, her voice carrying over the sudden stillness. "Nothing like an impromptu burial to end a fight," Trent agreed, lowering his weapon. The dust settled, leaving only the remnants of Kor's crew, those who hadn't fled or been incapacitated, staring at the hole that had consumed their leader. Vexia took a deep breath, the adrenaline coursing through her veins, a heady reminder of the gamble they'd just won. "And that, folks, is how you upstage the Dark Council's little puppet show." Ronk laughed, a sound that was half relief and half wild triumph. "Think they enjoyed the performance, who cares?" Cree replied, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "We're the stars now." Vexia couldn't suppress her grin. They'd done it. Against the odds, in the face of certain doom, they'd turned the tide. But the game wasn't over yet. The Dark Council was still watching, still waiting, and she had no intention of letting them off easy. "Let's regroup," she said, leading her team away from the battlefield. "We've still got work to do." With Core defeated and their spirits bolstered, they moved forward. The arena was still a twisting nightmare, but for the first time, it felt like they were in control. The alien cube, their ingenuity, and their indomitable spirit had turned the tide. Now, all that remained was to see it through to the end. The Dark Council could stew in their own frustration. They'd underestimated humanity's tenacity. And as Vexia and her team pressed on, she felt a fierce satisfaction at having given them a show they wouldn't soon forget. They were the authors of their own fate now, and they were just getting started. The chaos of the arena had settled, leaving behind the broken remnants of Core's crew. Dust hung in the air like the aftermath of a poorly executed magic trick, leaving everyone squinting and coughing. The feeling of victory was electric, but Vexia knew better than to get too comfortable. In the arena, complacency was just another word for stupidity. "Looks like we outperformed expectations," Cree quipped, a smirk twitching at her lips as she surveyed the battlefield. "Expectations were low," Ronk replied, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Dark Council thought we'd be toast, more like overcooked toast at this point." Trent, ever the minimalist when it came to emotions, shrugged. "Toast or not, we're still breathing." Vexia turned her attention to the alien cube, its surface now dim after its recent exertion. It had done its job better than she'd hoped, but there was no telling how many more miracles it had left. "We need to regroup and figure out what's next," she said, pocketing the cube like a nervous gambler with a lucky coin. They moved swiftly, putting distance between themselves and the battlefield before the Dark Council could throw another curveball. The arena was vast, filled with corners and crevices that offered temporary respite. They found one such nook, a small alcove nestled between two jagged rock formations. "What do you think the Council's planning now?" Cree asked, settling against the cool stone. "Probably deciding whether to blow us up or bore us to death," Ronk said, rubbing a hand over his stubbly chin. "Either way doesn't change the fact they're watching," Vexia pointed out. The Dark Council had eyes everywhere, and their idea of fun was probably akin to a cat playing with its food. "But we're not their toys anymore, yet." Trent raised an eyebrow. "And how do you figure that?" Vexia leaned back, a small, defiant smile playing on her lips. "Core's gone. We've beaten the odds, shown that we're more than just their entertainment for the day. It's time we make them listen." The prospect of confronting the arena's overlords was daunting, but it wasn't impossible. Core might have been a puppet, but now it was time to cut the strings. "Think they'll be willing to negotiate?" Cree asked, skepticism heavy in her voice. "Negotiate?" Ronk chuckled darkly. "Sure, right after they throw us a parade and name a holiday after us. We're better off betting on a meteor shower. They're not going to give up their power easily," Vexia conceded. But with the right leverage, her mind ticked over possibilities. The alien cube was a wild card, a potential bargaining chip, but it was risky and the Council was not known for their understanding nature. Still, they had to try. "Maybe we need a distraction," Trent suggested. "Something big enough to make them rethink their priorities. And how do we pull that off?" Ronk asked. "Throw a party." "Get everyone singing Kumbaya?" "Not exactly," Vexia said, her eyes narrowing as an idea began to form. "But uniting the other teams against the Council might just do the trick." Cree tilted her head, considering the notion. "You want to start a rebellion in the middle of the arena, why not?" Vexia said, a spark of madness in her eyes. "We've got nothing to lose and everything to gain, everything including our heads," Ronk muttered, though there was a reluctant admiration in his tone. Vexia stood, her decision made. "We've already done the impossible today. Let's see if we can't beat the odds twice." With that, they set off to rally the others. The arena, with all its traps and pitfalls, seemed less daunting now. It was still a death trap, but it was their death trap, and they had just turned it into a stage for rebellion. Their first stop was the remnants of Kor's crew. Some were licking their wounds, others were simply trying to process the fact that their leader had been swallowed by the earth. Vexia approached them with caution but also with purpose. "Listen up," she called, her voice carrying authority born of battle. "Kor's out of the picture. You all saw what happened. The council thinks we're just here for their amusement, but we can change that." The crew eyed her warily, disbelief etched into their features. One of them, a lanky man with a sullen expression, spoke up. "And how do you plan to do that?" "By standing together," Vexia replied, her gaze meeting each of theirs. "Individually, we're just pawns. But together, we're a force they can't ignore." "Sounds like suicidal optimism to me," the man said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe," she admitted. "But what's the alternative? Wait here to get picked off one by one?" There was a murmur among the group, uncertain but hopeful. Vexia could see the flicker of possibility in their eyes, the spark of hope that had been all but extinguished. "So what's the plan?" another crew member asked. "We rally the other teams, get them to see that we're stronger united," Vexia explained. "Then we demand the council face us. Together, we have the leverage to force them into a corner, assuming they don't just blast us to bits first," Ronk added, ever the realist. "It's a risk," Vexia agreed. "But it's one worth taking." The crew seemed to mull it over, their resolve strengthening with each passing second. Finally, the lanky man nodded. "Count us in." With one crew on board, Vexia and her team moved on, the idea of rebellion gaining momentum. They traveled through the arena, reaching out to the scattered teams who had been watching the fight from a safe distance. Each team, initially wary, soon found the logic in her words, the strength in unity. The arena, vast and unforgiving, was a different beast now. Instead of separate factions vying for survival, it was becoming a collective force, a rising tide against the Dark Council's control. As the day wore on, Vexia found herself leading an unlikely alliance. The teams gathered, their numbers bolstered by the shared desire for freedom, for a chance to break free from the chains of the arena. Ronk surveyed the growing crowd, a sly grin on his face. "Looks like we've got ourselves an army," Cree snorted. "A ragtag army of hopeful idiots." "But our idiots," Trent pointed out, a rare sentimentality in his voice. Vexia allowed herself a moment of pride. They'd accomplished what had seemed impossible only hours ago. Now, the real challenge lay ahead, confronting the masters of the arena and demanding their freedom. As dusk approached, the arena was filled with a restless energy. The teams were ready, their spirits lifted by the possibility of change. Vexia stood at the forefront, the alien cube in her pocket and determination in her eyes. "All right, let's give the council a show," she said, rallying her impromptu army. The march towards the central hub of the arena was tense, every step filled with anticipation. The Dark Council's control center loomed ahead, a monolithic structure that seemed to pulse with its own dark energy. It was here that the final act would unfold. As they approached, the air crackled with tension. The council had to know they were coming, but Vexia hoped the sheer audacity of their approach would buy them precious time. Her team flanked her as they reached the door, a massive structure that seemed to mock their efforts. But Vexia was undeterred. With a nod to Cree, she signaled the start of their plan. The doors creaked open, revealing the council chamber. It was a stark contrast to the chaotic arena, a place of cold efficiency and ruthless control. The council members, robed figures perched on high seats, regarded the intruders with a mixture of disdain and amusement. "What is this?" one of them intoned, his voice echoing in the cavernous hall. Vexia stepped forward, her voice ringing with authority. "An ultimatum." The council members exchanged glances, their expressions hidden but their displeasure palpable. "You presume much, human, and yet here we are," Vexia replied, unfazed. "We're done being your entertainment. We want our freedom." Another council member scoffed. "You stand in the heart of our domain and you dare speak of freedom?" "I do," Vexia said, her gaze unwavering. "You've underestimated us for too long. We've united and we're not leaving without a fight." The council's silence was heavy, loaded with unspoken threats. But Vexia held her ground, the support of the assembled teams bolstering her resolve. "Your defiance is noted," the first council member said, his tone icy. "But do not mistake this for strength." Ronk chuckled darkly, stepping forward. "Maybe not, but we sure as hell outnumber you 10-1. I'd call that a good start." The tension in the room was a living thing, an invisible force that pressed in on all sides. But Vexia could sense a shift, the balance beginning to tip in their favor. "You've had your fun," she said, her voice firm. "Now it's over. Let us go or face the consequences." The council's deliberation was silent, a whisper among themselves. But the arena was not silent. It thrummed with the pulse of those who stood with Vexia, a testament to their resolve. Finally, the first council member spoke again, his words grudging. "Very well, you have earned your freedom, but know this: freedom comes with a price." Vexia nodded, accepting the terms. "We'll pay it, whatever it takes." With that, the arena began to shift once more, but this time it was different. The oppressive weight lifted, the landscape returning to its original form. The teams, their spirits buoyed, began to disperse, the realization of their victory settling in. Vexia and her team stood together, the weight of their achievement settling on their shoulders. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd beaten the arena, the Dark Council, and secured their freedom. The future was uncertain, but for now they had hope. And in the dark corners of the universe, hope was the most powerful weapon of all.